Have you ever sat there staring at your phone, wondering why her replies feel colder now than they did before? Why the conversations that once flowed like a river now feel like you're pulling water from a dry well? You scroll back through old messages, remembering the way she used to laugh at your jokes, how her eyes lit up when she saw you. And now, all you get are short, delayed replies, excuses, or worse, silence. And in that silence, your chest tightens. You replay everything you've said, every move you've made, trying to figure out the exact moment she started slipping away. You wonder if you said too much, or maybe not enough. If you chased too hard, or didn't fight hard enough. That knot in your stomach. It's not just about her ignoring you. It's about the haunting thought that you're losing her, piece by piece, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I know what it feels like, brother. It's like watching a candle burn lower and lower, the flame fading no matter how much you shield it from the wind. You tell yourself not to panic, not to text again, not to double call, but the urge is unbearable. You want to shake her awake, remind her of the man she used to be drawn to, and yet, deep down, there's another voice whispering, maybe she's already gone. That thought terrifies you. Not because she's the only woman in the world, but because in losing her interest you feel like you're losing your sense of worth as a man. You start asking yourself, what's wrong with me? Why wasn't I enough to keep her? But here's the truth no one tells you. A woman losing interest isn't always about you being not enough. Sometimes it's about how easily we, as men, give away our power without even realizing it. We forget what made us magnetic in the first place. We start chasing approval, waiting for her validation, like beggars outside a door that used to be wide open. And she feels it. She feels when you stop being the man who had direction, confidence, and self-respect, and start being the man who revolves his entire existence around whether or not she texts back. Women can sense that shift instantly, and when they do, their attraction begins to fade like smoke in the wind. I want you to picture this. A man sitting in his apartment late at night, the glow of his phone lighting his tired face. He's replaying the last date they had. She smiled, but it wasn't the same. She hugged him, but it felt distant. He tells himself, maybe it's just in my head. But then a memory hits him. A week ago she said she was busy. But later that night, her Instagram story showed her out with friends. He didn't say anything, but inside, it cut deep. That man is you right now. You're caught in the battle between holding on and letting go, and it feels like no matter what you do, you're losing. But let me stop you right there. Because the man who wins in this situation isn't the one who panics, who begs, who tries to claw back her attention with desperate moves. No. The man who wins is the one who remembers his value. The one who flips the script so powerfully that she starts fearing the thought of losing him. The man who stops making her the center of his universe and instead becomes the man whose life is so full, so purposeful, so undeniably magnetic that she feels the shift and thinks to herself, wait, what if I lose him? And that, my brother, is the moment everything changes. Have you ever caught yourself asking, what happened to us? How did she go from wanting me to treating me like an option? That question alone keeps a lot of men awake at night. It's a quiet torment, because you remember how it used to feel when she lit up your phone, when her laughter was warm, when her eyes told you she was proud to be with you. And now? Now you sense the distance. You see it in her words, in her excuses, in her hesitation. It feels like she's slipping through your fingers and you can't understand why. I want to tell you about a guy named Daniel. He's not much different from you. Mid-30s, good career, confident, at least that's how people saw him. When he met Sarah, he felt alive again, like he had found someone who truly got him. At first, she was all over him, texting, calling, showing up just to see him. Daniel felt like the man. But then, slowly, it shifted. She started pulling back. She was too busy to hang out. Her texts went from paragraphs to short replies. Calls that used to last hours turned into 5-minute check-ins, if that. Daniel tried harder. He sent flowers, planned dinners, wrote long, heartfelt messages. And the more he gave, the less she seemed to care. One night, Daniel sat across from Sarah at dinner. She scrolled her phone while he talked about his day. He felt invisible. He cracked a joke, one that used to make her laugh until she cried. But this time, she barely looked up. That's when it hit him. She wasn't losing interest because of who he was. She was losing interest because he had stopped being the man she was first attracted to. He had shifted into a man who needed her validation to feel worthy. Without knowing it, Daniel had started orbiting around her. Instead of being the man she wanted to orbit around. That's the trap, isn't it? We think giving more will save it. We think if we bend over backwards, she'll see our love and come back to us. But attraction doesn't work that way. A woman doesn't stay because you overcompensate. She stays because she feels something she doesn't want to lose. And when you turn yourself into the man who chases her approval, you take away that feeling. Let me break it down for you with something real. Women don't consciously say, "I want to pull away," but subconsciously, they feel the shift. In the beginning, you were focused on your mission, your passions, your drive. She saw a man who knew where he was going, and she wanted to be part of that. But once you started needing her to fill the emptiness inside you, you stopped being the man who leads and became the man who waits, waiting for her to text back, waiting for her to decide if she wants to see you, waiting for her to choose you. And let me tell you this, when a woman senses that waiting energy, her attraction begins to die. Not because you're not good enough, but because you're no longer showing up as the man who doesn't need her to feel complete. Think back to the first time you met her. Did you sit around wondering if she liked you? No, you were being yourself, unapologetically. You cracked jokes, told stories, had plans that didn't revolve around her. You were unpredictable, exciting, full of energy. She wasn't the center of your world, she was an addition to it. That's why she wanted you. That's why she chased you. And that's the same energy you need to remember right now. Let me share another story. There's a guy I knew named Marcus. His girlfriend started pulling away after 2 years of dating. She used to brag about him to her friends, but lately she'd cancel dates and say she was tired. Marcus panicked. He started texting her non-stop, asking if everything was okay, begging her to be honest. You know what that did? It pushed her further. She told him she needed space. That word crushed him. But instead of falling apart completely, Marcus did something most men don't. He pulled back too. He stopped sending long emotional texts. He stopped begging. He focused on his work, hit the gym harder, reconnected with his friends, and picked up a hobby he had dropped years ago, playing guitar. Suddenly, his life was moving again. And you know what happened? She noticed. She started asking what he was up to. She saw him laughing with his friends on social media. She saw his energy shift. And it hit her. Wait, I might lose him. That fear sparked her attraction again, not because Marcus manipulated her, but because he stopped trying to prove himself to her and started living for himself again. This is the psychological truth behind attraction. People value what they can lose. When she feels like you're sitting around waiting for her, she has no urgency to fight for you. But when she senses that your world is moving, with or without her, that's when she feels the fear of missing out. That's when she looks at you and remembers the man she didn't want to lose in the first place. So here's the pivot. Stop trying to convince her you're worth keeping. Start living in a way that makes her realize what she's losing. Women don't fear losing a man who's desperate to keep them. They fear losing the man who doesn't need them but still chooses them. That distinction is everything. I'm telling you this because I know how easy it is to spiral when you feel her interest slipping away. You tell yourself you'll do anything to get her back. But here's the truth. The harder you chase, the faster she runs. The moment you stop chasing and start owning your life, the balance shifts. She begins to wonder where your attention is going. She begins to think, if he's not obsessing over me, who is he giving his energy to? And that thought alone can wake her up in ways begging never will. Daniel eventually figured this out. After that dinner, he decided to stop trying to win her back with flowers and constant calls. He went back to boxing 3 nights a week, something he'd quit when their relationship got comfortable. He started focusing on his business, chasing opportunities he had been putting off. He reconnected with old friends, and as his world expanded again, something interesting happened. Sarah noticed. She started asking where he'd been, what he was working on, why he seemed happier. For the first time in months, she was the one chasing his attention, not because he played games, but because he remembered who he was without her approval. That shift reignited the spark. She feared losing the man who was moving forward, with or without her. And that, brother, is where the power lies, not in convincing her, not in begging her, but in becoming the man she doesn't want to lose. There's a moment every man remembers when she starts slipping away. Maybe it's the unanswered text that sits there for hours. Maybe it's the way she stops reaching for your hand in public. Or maybe it's that gut punch silence when she says, "I just need some space." Whatever form it takes, you feel it. And it doesn't just sting, it shakes your foundation, because when a woman loses interest, it doesn't feel like she's just pulling away from you. It feels like she's pulling away from the very core of who you thought you were. Take Michael, for example. He was in a 3-year relationship with a woman named Jenna. In the beginning, it was fireworks. She admired his drive, his confidence, his playful teasing. She told her friends she'd never met anyone like him. But slowly, as the years went on, Michael stopped noticing the little things. He became comfortable. He worked long hours, came home drained, and most nights ended with him scrolling on his phone beside her. He still loved her, but love without energy feels like absence. Jenna started drifting. First it was subtle, less laughter, less touch. Then it was obvious. Late nights with friends, cancelled plans, distant eyes at dinner. Michael panicked. He showered her with gifts, begged for more time together, even planned a surprise weekend trip. But here's the kicker. The more he tried, the more she pulled away. Why? Because deep down, she didn't want gifts. She wanted the man she fell for, the man who had a mission, who carried himself like his life had meaning beyond her approval. Instead, she saw a man terrified of losing her, and fear is not attractive. Fear suffocates, fear makes you needy, and nothing kills attraction faster than neediness. Psychologists call this the scarcity principle. We value what is scarce. We fight for what we think we could lose. When Michael turned himself into an unlimited resource, always available, always ready to do anything to win her back, he removed the very tension that kept her attraction alive. She didn't feel she could lose him. She felt she already had him. And the truth is, when a woman knows she can have you no matter how she treats you, her respect begins to fade. And without respect, interest dies. Another guy, Chris, learnt this the hard way. Chris was a musician. When he met his girlfriend, she loved his passion for writing songs. She loved how alive he looked when he was on stage, how his friends admired him, how the world seemed to orbit around his energy. But once they got serious, he started changing. He stopped booking gigs so he could spend more time with her. He stopped writing songs because he didn't want to neglect the relationship. His world shrank until the only thing left in it was her. At first, she appreciated the attention, but soon it turned heavy. The man she once admired for his fire now looked to her for a spark, and that kind of pressure, of being someone's entire source of meaning, crushed her attraction. When she finally told Chris she wasn't feeling it anymore, he was devastated. He thought sacrificing his passions would prove his love. In reality, it smothered the very energy that made her want him in the first place. When he lost himself, she lost interest. Here's the truth men often miss. Attraction is not logical. You can't argue, beg, or prove your way back into her heart. Attraction is emotional. It's about how she feels when she's around you. And nothing makes a woman feel attraction more than being around a man who is grounded in his own life, his own purpose, his own self-respect. Think of it like this. When you first met her, you didn't have to convince her to like you. She felt it. She felt your confidence, your light-heartedness, your focus. That was the man she wanted to be around. And if she's losing interest now, it's not because you're not good enough. It's because somewhere along the line you stopped being that man. You started trading self-respect for her attention, and in doing so, you lost the balance that drew her in. Let me share something a therapist once told me that stuck forever. The more you chase, the more she escapes. The more you stand firm in your value, the more she gravitates back to you. It sounds simple, but it's a psychological truth. When you chase, you signal you've placed her above yourself. You show you'll break your own boundaries just to keep her around. That makes her feel like the prize, and you like the pursuer. But when you shift the dynamic and reclaim your focus, you remind her that you are the prize too. That's when the fear creeps in, the fear of losing a man who doesn't need her to survive, but who chooses her because she adds value to an already meaningful life. Michael eventually learned this. After months of chasing, he hit a wall. He was exhausted from begging for her love, so he stopped. Not as a game, but as a choice. He went back to the gym. He started mentoring younger guys at work, something he had always wanted to do. He picked up photography, a hobby he'd dropped years earlier. Slowly, his life began to fill again, not with her attention, but with purpose. One evening, he posted a picture of a sunrise he'd captured on an early morning run. Jenna commented, "Wow, I didn't know you were into photography." A week later, she reached out to see what he was up to. The same woman who had pulled away for months was now curious again, not because he begged, but because she felt the shift. She saw the man she once admired resurfacing, the man who had a fire in his soul and didn't revolve around her mood swings. She felt for the first time in a long time that she might lose him, and that fear reignited her interest. That's what happens when you reclaim your life. Attraction doesn't return because you prove you love her more. Attraction returns when she realizes she could lose a man who knows his worth. And that's exactly what you need to do. There comes a night in every man's life when he faces the brutal silence of rejection. For David, that night came on a rainy Thursday, sitting alone in his car outside her apartment. He had brought flowers. Roses, her favorite. He told himself this gesture would remind her of how things used to be. Maybe she'd remember their first date, the way she once pressed her head against his chest and whispered she'd never felt safer. But when she opened the door, she didn't smile. She didn't even step outside. She looked at the roses in his hands and said the words he had feared for weeks. "I don't feel the same anymore. I think it's better if we stop seeing each other." David froze. His throat tightened, his chest burned. He wanted to argue, to plead, to remind her of every memory they had built, but all he could do was nod as she closed the door, gently, almost politely. The sound of that latch clicking was louder than thunder. He sat in his car, soaked in rain and heartbreak, staring at the flowers on the passenger seat. That's when the weight of it all hit him. He wasn't just losing her, he was losing himself. In the weeks that followed, David unraveled. He stopped going to the gym, he stopped hanging out with his friends. Every night he sat in his dark apartment scrolling through old photos, torturing himself with memories of the woman who no longer wanted him. His mind was a loop of questions. What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? How could she throw it all away? One night, after another sleepless spiral, David stood in front of the bathroom mirror. His face looked hollow. His eyes were bloodshot. And for the first time he admitted the truth he had been avoiding. She didn't just lose interest because of who she was. She lost interest because of who he had become. Somewhere along the way, he had traded his fire for comfort, his confidence for approval, his purpose for her presence. He had become dependent on her validation, and that dependence suffocated the attraction. That realization cut deep, but it was also the beginning of his turning point, because in that moment of raw honesty, he saw something most men never admit. He had handed away his power, and if he gave it away, then he could take it back. This is the painful truth that most men run from. Women don't stay for your promises, your gifts, or your constant availability. They stay because of how you make them feel. And nothing makes a woman feel safer, more alive, and more attracted than being with a man who lives from his center. A man who is full, even when he is alone. David decided that night he was done begging. He was done shrinking himself in hopes she might love him again. He was done making her the sun around which he orbited. He picked up his phone and deleted her number, not out of anger, but out of resolve. Then he set an alarm for 6:00 a.m. and promised himself he would rise. Not for her, but for himself. The next morning, when that alarm went off, he wanted to roll over. He wanted to sink back into the familiar comfort of pain. But something inside pushed him up. He laced his shoes and went for a run. The air was cold, the sky grey, but with every step he felt something returning. Discipline, energy, life. That run became a habit. Slowly his body changed. His posture straightened, his eyes cleared. He started reading books he had always put off, journaling his thoughts, reconnecting with old friends who had missed the man he once was. And here's what happened. As David rebuilt himself, he realized something liberating. He didn't actually want her back, not the way he thought he did. He wanted the feeling he once had when he was strong, centered, and alive. And that feeling had never come from her. It had come from who he was when he was living in alignment with his purpose. That's the paradox most men never see until they're broken open. When you stop trying to hold on to her and start reclaiming yourself, you become the man she feared losing in the first place. Attraction doesn't return because you chased harder, it returns because you rose higher. Months later, David ran into her at a cafe. She barely recognized him at first, leaner, sharper, more confident. He wasn't faking it. He was different. They talked politely, but he wasn't trying to win her back. His mind wasn't looping on, how do I make her want me again? It was calm, grounded, at peace. And you could see it in her eyes, the curiosity, the surprise, the subtle spark of fear. She wondered, who is he becoming, and what if I've lost him forever? That's the shift, brother. That's the moment when the tables turn, when she no longer pities the man who begged for her love, but admires the man who rebuilt himself without it. When she feels, not just hears, that you don't need her to breathe. That's when she fears losing you, and whether she comes back or not, you've already won. Because the victory isn't in regaining her, it's in reclaiming yourself. There comes a time when the silence becomes different. In the beginning, it was the silence of her not calling, not answering, not reaching back. That silence was torture because it felt like rejection, like absence, like a slow death. But now the silence is something else. It's peace, it's strength. It's the sound of a man who has stopped waiting for her to validate his worth. Think about it. Every story we've walked through, the man who gave everything only to watch her slip away, the man who begged and chased until he broke, the man who hit the bottom and stood back up. They all faced the same crossroads. And that crossroads is where you are too. Either stay in the loop of desperation or step into the clarity that changes everything. The clarity is this: her interest was never yours to control. You cannot force attraction. You cannot beg desire. You cannot plead someone into valuing you. What you can do is remember who you were before you forgot yourself. The man with a mission, the man with a fire, The man whose presence was magnetic because he wasn't performing for anyone, he was simply living in his own truth. That is the man she was drawn to. That is the man who commands respect. Let me tell you one last story. A man named Alex spent years tying his happiness to a woman who treated him like an afterthought. He stayed because he was afraid of being alone. He bent because he thought that was love, and when she finally walked away, he thought his world ended. But in time, Alex learned something profound. It wasn't her absence that had broken him. It was his own abandonment of himself. Once he faced that truth, he rebuilt piece by piece. He stopped asking, "What do I need to do to keep her?" and started asking, "What kind of man do I need to become so I never lose myself again?" And that question changed his life. Because here's the truth most men never learn until it's too late. Women may come and go, interest may rise and fall, but the man you choose to be, that's what remains. And the man who stays rooted in his value doesn't live in fear of being left. He knows that the right woman doesn't stay because he begged her to. She stays because his presence is undeniable, because his life is moving forward with or without her. So if you take nothing else, take this. The day you stop trying to hold on to her is the day she realizes she can lose you. And more importantly, it's the day you realize you were never lost to begin with. The lesson is not about her, it's about you. It always was. You don't need to fight for someone to see your worth. You need to see it so clearly yourself that no silence, no rejection, no fading interest can make you forget it again. And maybe she comes back, maybe she doesn't. But that's not the point anymore. The point is that you will never again be the man who begs for love, because you've learned the deeper truth. When you stand in your strength, love is not something you chase, it's something you attract. And that is why, when a man truly understands this, he no longer fears her losing interest, because he knows the only thing he cannot afford to lose is himself. So remember this, and remember it forever. The man who refuses to abandon himself is the man no woman can ever truly walk away from.